All right. Hello, everyone. Today's webinar is entitled Budget and Budget Justification. This is a USDA Food Safety Outreach Program technical assistance proposal that was funded by USDA. This particular proposal is a collaboration between Texas Tech University, Alabama A&M University, and Iowa State University. The title of the funded grant is Empowering Food Safety Minority Serving Institutions Food Safety Specialists to write successful food safety outreach program grants through education, training, and technical assistance. The PI for this particular project is Dr. Angela Shaw. She serves as our principal investigator. And the co-PIs for this grant, or the co-investigators, are Dr. Shannon Coleman from Iowa State University, Dr. Christine Strong from Engineering Science Editors, and myself, Dr. Amitra Jackson-Davis from Alabama A&M University. So for today's presentation, the outline will go as follows. We will talk about the components of a budget. We will then talk about what is a budget justification. We will then move into the required forms, and then we will start our question and answer session. Our guest speaker for today is Mr. Marcus Harper from the Office of Sponsored Programs at Alabama A&M University. So I want to start off with this particular slide. Budgets and budget justifications really are a way of life. So when you think about your own personal lives, at some point, you have to use a budget and you have to justify the money that you are spending. Some better than others, but budgets are not new. And so the same way we apply budgets to our personal lives, we also have to apply those budgets to our proposals as well. So as we go through this presentation, I know budget and budget justification can be a dreaded part of the proposal process, but hopefully this presentation will ease some of your concerns in that matter. So let's talk about this in terms of building a home. Here on this slide, you can see that we are building a home in state A. So let's say we're maybe building a home in my state of Alabama. When we talk about building a home, there are a lot of expenses that are involved and that must be considered to ensure that this house or this home is successfully built. So for example, we have to decide if we're going with a finished lot versus undeveloped land. One will cost more than the other. Of course, if you're dealing with undeveloped land, you can look to spend more money. And then we have to consider, for example, the construction costs. So for example, the site work, the foundation, which is essential to building a home, and then the framing. And then we go to the exterior finish, and then the hatchback. You can see some of the other aspects there that must be considered: cabinets, countertops, appliances, landscaping. And then you also must consider employee expenses. So the individuals who will be working on building the home. For example, if you hire 5 employees versus 10 employees, what does it look like in terms of benefits and insurance? So those are all different aspects that we must consider when we are building a home in state A, which would be, for example, in Alabama. Now let's look at building that same exact home in another state, for example, in Florida or in California. You can take that same floor plan, right? And depending on what state you build it in, you're considering those same different aspects that are listed there. It could cost more. So the take-home message here is that budgets and budget justifications are definitely not a one-size-fits-all. A lot of times in proposal writing, we are tempted to take one budget and just kind of see how it can fit another proposal, but it's very important to remember when we think of our proposals in terms of the objectives, in terms of our goals and what we actually want to accomplish, the budgets can look very, very different. So it's very, very important that when we are building our proposal, when we're building our objectives, that we consider budgets that are appropriate for that particular proposal. So that's why our budgets are always a work in progress from one proposal to the next. So that's very important to remember. So what are the different components of a budget? So when we think about a budget as it relates to a proposal cost, you can see on the slide there are several different categories that we must consider. So we have to consider personnel, travel, equipment, participant, support cost, other direct costs outside of what we just listed, facilities and administrative cost, for example, and then also your indirect cost as well. And we'll talk about each of these individually. It's also important to remember that these costs must be considered, these categories must be considered irregardless of whether you are the leading or the subcontracting institution. All of these must be considered. Now, when we talk about a budget justification, it is a categorical description of the proposed cost. Okay, so when we think about budget, we think about just the numbers, but when we think about a justification, we are trying to explain to the agency, to the review panel, why we need the funds that we say that we are needing. So we must explain, for example, staffing that's needed to fulfill the objectives of the proposal, any supplies or services that are associated with the work or with the objectives. We need to also show the methods that we use to estimate or calculate our different direct costs, and then any other details that we deem important. Again, this is a time where we really want to lay out why we need the funds that we need. We also must address each of the major cost categories, such as salaries, fringe benefits, equipment, travel, supplies. All that must be built into our budget. I would also like to use this slide to convey to everyone, or to remind everyone, that when we are building a budget, we must be sure that what we are requesting aligns with our objectives. So that's very, very important to remember. Okay, so let's talk a little bit in more detail about the components of a budget justification. Key personnel. So for this particular category, we are including those individuals that are associated with the entities who will perform some type of duty on the proposed work. And usually in this particular section, we are accounting for the time that the individual is going to dedicate to the work. So if the name is known, you may include the name, what their title will be on the project, time to be contributed, and also we want to explain their particular role. Other personnel, such as postdocs, graduate and undergraduate students, need to be considered under the key personnel, but other personnel is the subcategory. All right, so for the fringe benefits, provide information on the rate based on the type of personnel, because it will differ depending on the personnel type. Now, when you are calculating fringe benefits, it's very, very important that we work with our Office of Sponsored Programs to make sure that we are using the correct percentage, because the incorrect percentage could throw off your budget, and it could be a problem later on down the road should the work be funded. So it's very important that we ensure that this is done correctly. And a lot of universities have spreadsheets, Excel spreadsheets that they share with their PIs or co-PIs, researchers to help out with this. Now, when we talk about travel, remember, this is travel that is associated with the project. So this may be in the form of travel to present the work at conferences. For FSOP, for example, it may be that you are traveling to different farming operations. So it's very important that that be detailed and it be well thought out. So we want to identify the purpose of the travel, and it's best to link these with different objectives. That helps you to make sure that you have enough funds there. The destination, if it's known. And the reason we say if it's known, sometimes you don't know exactly where something will be held, like for a conference, maybe that's 3 or 4 years down the road, maybe you, or 3 years down the road, maybe you don't know. But if you do know, it's important to consider that, because we know that travel is very expensive these days. And so we want to be sure that we're calculating that cost as close to what we would really experience during the time of travel. The number of individuals per trip, because the more individuals that you want to participate, the higher your cost would be. Estimated length of the trip, airfare, registration costs, transportation, how you're going to get there, even your lodging is important as well. So this particular section will look different for individuals depending upon what your objectives are. Your participant trainee support costs, these are usually associated with putting on a conference, workshop, or a symposium for those individuals who are not employees of the applicant or a subboard, because if they are employees, they would go under the key personnel or other personnel. So it's very important that that is well thought out. Other direct costs, and again, this is all dependent upon our objectives. The materials and supplies that are needed, and any equipment under $5,000. If it's over $5,000, there's a separate equipment line that you could use. And it's really, when we talk about materials and supplies, we're talking about those expendable materials that you need to make your project work. So list general categories such as glassware, chemicals, any other costs, animal costs that are associated with it. A category less than 1,000 is not required to be itemized. So when you think about your materials and supplies, again, like with all these categories, you really want to focus on your objectives and use that as an opportunity to ensure that you have everything that you need. Publication cost, very important, because for most researchers, most of us, when we do work, we want to publish it in a journal of some type. So it's best that you spend some time thinking about what journals you could possibly want to submit to, and then see what the publication costs are and add that there. And again, in this section, it may differ. Maybe you won't have a publication cost for all years of the project. Maybe it's just the middle to the end. So it will really depend upon your particular project. Any computer services, whether it be the purchase of computers or services related to those, or any equipment rental or facility rental fees, all that should be included. Again, I really want to emphasize that we must get quotes that are as close to what our actual costs will be. So although, especially when there is a time crunch, there is a temptation to just estimate off of our heads, but we really don't want to do that. We really want to go through the process of reaching out to the different entities to see what these actual costs are. And of course, your indirect costs for FSOP, it is allowed at 30% of the total federal funds awarded. Now, RFPs, you want to check that because it will be different for different proposals. So it's very important that you really understand that. It's really important that we also work very closely, and I can't say this enough, very closely with our sponsor programs office. I know for me, with Mr. Marcus Harper, I work closely with him. It's just a good way to make sure that you have all of your numbers and all the percentages are correct. Because I have been on the end where those percentages were not correct. Usually it's not an issue when the percentages are too low. It becomes an issue when the percentages are too high. And so you have to figure out where do I need to cut. Okay, before I discuss this particular slide, one of the points that I really, really want to emphasize, again, is making sure that you have numbers that are close to your actual cost. Now, sometimes there are some individuals who write proposals where they choose to work with the budget first. So before, and this is usually the responsibility of the PI, to kind of get an idea of where they want those funds to go. This is really important because, performing research is expensive. Oftentimes we as researchers, because I know I've done this before and I've learned not to do this, from writing proposals, We come up with our objectives, we write the whole proposal, we invite people in, not necessarily in that order, but we do all these things. You know, we get individuals, collaborators to help us write, to give us information that they've already put some of their time into the proposal writing process, only to look at the budget to realize half of the people that you invited as co-PIs, you cannot afford. So now you have to make the tough decision of uninviting someone to the party. And we all know once you're invited to a party, you want to be a part of the party, right? You've planned, you found an outfit, you know, you've done all of this. In proposal writing, you've planned, you've asked individuals to give you information, they've helped to write, only to realize that you can't afford to have them on the grant. So it's really important that as the PI, that you have a good sense of what it is that you want to do, because that really does dictate the work that you're able to do. The other aspect I want you to remember is that in the event, you know, if someone has 1 month worth of salary, but the budget only allows for half a month now, then you might run into an issue with a co-investigator telling you that they can't do as much work as we initially thought because of the time constraint, because everyone is paying close attention to their time. Time is really, really big among researchers. So just keep those in mind. So what must a budget do? And these I call these my non-negotiables for preparing a budget. It must demonstrate that all aspects of the proposal, all aspects were considered. So the work that you plan to do, all the objectives, it must do that. It must align with the requirements of the funding agency. So if the funding agency caps the budget at $400,000, then we can't do $410,000, right? So we have to make sure that we understand the requirements of the funding agency. We must make sure that our budgets align with the requirements of our specific units or our universities, sponsored programs, offices. That's why working with your office of sponsored programs, they are your best friend through this proposal writing process. Kind of like I mentioned before, align with the objectives of the proposed work. The budget must do that. And they must demonstrate that all team members were involved in the budget determination. This is all important, not just from a funding side. Of course, it is important from a budget side, but also as we think about the review panel that will be reviewing this. You want all of these aspects to be met. You want all of these requirements to be met so that it doesn't raise any red flags. The one that's very, very important, all of these are important, but it must reflect the actual costs that will be needed to perform the work. If not, this will be you, should the work be funded. If we don't make sure that our costs reflect the work that we told the funding agency that we're going to do, we as researchers or PIs or co-PIs will be left trying to figure out, what do we do now? And a lot of times, once projects are funded, it is very rare that a funding agency will give you more money, right? Because they are on a budget. They know how much money they can allow. So the idea of going back to the funding agency saying, well, we left this out, right? The idea of them giving you more money is slim, very, very slim to none. The only thing you will probably be left with is working with the agency on moving around money to meet the needs of the project. So we must make sure that the work or that the budget actually reflects the work that we would like to do. Now, from an evaluation standpoint, and when I say evaluation, I mean from the standpoint of being on a review panel. I've been on several review panels, and we are provided with guidelines in which we evaluate proposals. So for the budget and budget justification, this is just a snapshot from FSOP from page 22. The criteria that are used, you can see them listed there, A, B, and C. But the first one that we've kind of emphasized a lot so far is to adequately, the budget and budget justification adequately supports project activities that are consistent with the proposed objectives. Very, very, very important. And you can see the other two listed there. And so we just want to make sure that actually happens, and the other two as well, because this is the criteria that the review panel will use when they are trying to figure out, does your budget and budget justification make sense? Okay, so now I will turn it over to Mr. Marcus Harper, and he will start his discussion with you on required budget forms. Mr. Harper.
Good afternoon. As she said, I am Mr. Harper. I am Marcus, and I will be taking it from here. Okay, so once we have completed all of our final proposal, once we have done everything and we're ready to input the proposal into the system, that system is usually going to be grants.gov for USDA. Mostly all proposals and all proposed budgets and justifications have to be prepared and submitted through grants.gov, the website. The way they do it is you have a workspace that they assigned or that you open up. You have a user ID and you create a workspace, and you will see in this workspace you have the different budget forms. There are different types. Okay, next slide. As you can see here, your budget forms are going to be part of your mandatory forms to be completed. Your grants.gov workspace is usually created by yourself, the researcher, and or your grant administrator, which is in the Office of Sponsored Programs. The budget forms are assigned to the RFP. The budget forms that are assigned to the RFP will be listed as mandatory forms to be completed. So you can't necessarily complete the workspace until you have completed the budget forms, along with a list of others. Okay, next. The different types of budget forms are usually going to be one of three. Either it's going to be a research and related form, the budget information for construction form, and of course the budget narrative attachment form. Next. Okay, here is the budget research and related form. This is usually going to be the one that you see the most out of the workspaces that you do. So as you can see, this is usually done, this form is completed for both the prime awardee or the sub awardee. And the main pieces, this is just an example. This is a snippet of what it looks like, just to give you an idea of what to expect. And what they'll do is highlight the areas that need to be completed. For example, as you can see, the UEI number, that's usually going to come from your Office of Sponsored Programs. Again, we have to reiterate the fact that you have to work with your Sponsored Programs office to make life easy and to get this thing done and submitted. As you can tell, you would indicate if it was a project, which is a prime, or if you're a sub or if you're a sub awardee. They also want you to give a period of performance. As you know, it may not necessarily be the exact period of performance that's been awarded, but when you're writing a proposal, they want to have an idea of when you think this, how long, what time frame you think this will be. And then, as you can see, let's go back. If you remember, Dr. Davis mentioned earlier about the components of the budget. In the form, the form is broken down into each one of those components. As you can see, senior key personnel, that's one section, the A section, and here you have the other personnel. That's the B section. And if we were looking at a full budget, you would see A, B, C, D, so forth and so on, for the different components for travel, equipment, other direct costs, so forth and so on. So you would come in, and as you can see in the senior personnel, you can see that you list the individual by his first name, last name, and then the salaries requested, and then the fringe that will be applied. And all of this is really coming from the sheets that you have already prepared to enter the information in. So this is your fund, and you're entering all your information in, ready to submit. Now, once you have everything done and everything filled out the way you want, all you have to do with the budget justification is upload the PDF budget justification to this section here of the budget. Make sure it's PDF. A lot of people forget to do it in a PDF format, but make sure it's done. But then now, once you have everything done for that particular year, and you know it's a multi-year project, then what you will do is you have to add another year. And then you come into where it says add period. Click that, and it'll give you a duplicate of what you just put in, but it will have the budget period would have changed from 1 to 2. And it will be up in the header, up underneath the research. As you can see, if you look up at the header, you can see up in the research and related budget form in the fine print. It'll say budget period 1, but on the next one, it would say budget period 2. Okay, the next slide. Now, some USDA opportunities are construction related. So it takes on a different demeanor or a different aspect of what you have to do. Here is an example of what the construction budget would look like if, when you put the construction form, would look like for its budget. And as you can tell, it's not as detailed. It's not as detailed, and some things you don't necessarily have to be as detailed, I guess, when it comes to construction. But then you would also, there's another form where, and this is a snapshot down below of where you would put the budget narrative, explaining all of your numbers that you actually input. And all you really have to do is just PDF it and upload the budget narrative, and you'll be fine. Okay, next. Now here is a second, I want to say the second most used form that I see when it comes to USDA proposals. This form takes on a different approach than what the other two forms did. Now this form, some activities they want you to, some proposals, RFPs want you to do it based on a function or an activity that you develop within the proposal. So it's kind of like an objective. So you may have an approach where you want to fill it out, you want one objective, and then you budget out for that one objective. This gives you that opportunity where you can do that. So you may have up to 4 objectives here, and then you come in and input the objectives, and then you input the amount in the category that you want to put it in. So if it was right here, if it's a new proposal, you come all the way over this section to E, the federal column, this new and revised budget vote, and then that's where you put your totals for that particular period. Okay, next. Now, if you notice, here are your components. These are your components, just like we spoke of before. As you can see, everybody's there, A, B, C, D, travel, fringe benefits, personnel, travel, equipment, so forth and so on. Now, at the top, what would be here would be your activities or functions. And then it would list individually how much it would cost for each individual activity by personnel, by component, basically. Okay, and then go ahead, next slide. Now, when you come to this slide, you still got the same format, but if you notice, section C is dealing with non-federal resources. What are the non-federal resources? Those are usually going to be your cost share funds. The cost share funds that are support that the university either provides, or you may have found another third in-kind part, in-kind contribution that will be willing to help. And this is where you put their information based on the grant activity. Okay. Now, section D, Section D seems to throw a lot of professors off because they see forecasted cash needs, which automatically makes you think that, okay, this is something the county may need to know, may need to help, but not necessarily. All you really have to do is take that same first year, because they're asking for the first year, and whatever cost you incur for the total year divided by 4. That's going to give you what you would need, a good estimate of what you would need per quarter for that first year. Now, that's if you don't have your budget broken down by quarter. Now, if you have it broken down by quarter, you can actually just type in what you know that quarter would be, and that would suffice for that section. In section E, it's actually dealing with what you would be expected to do or what the funds are for the following years. The first year is already basically spoken of up in the other parts of the budget. So then the next year, that's in your column B. By activity, column B would give you the next year, and then the next year, and then the following years, all the way out until you're done. And which most grants are usually 5 years, no more than 5 years. So that's basically what that section is all about. Now, section F. Section F is dealing with your total cost for your total direct charges and your total indirect charges. And that's just that's just breaking it down. You would input that information there too. And remarks are for anything that you feel that you need to explain. For example, sometimes what your OSP would want to put there would be the method of how we calculate indirect costs. So for example, if it's modified total direct indirect costs, we would actually spell that out, modified total direct indirect costs at 48%. If it's just on salaries and wages, we'd say salaries and wages at 47.2%. And then you're done. Now that's basically it. Next slide.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Harper. So I want to use this opportunity to remind everyone about the on-demand webinars that we have available. There is a QR code there on the screen that you can use your cellular device to access. And then also you'll see some of the recorded presentations that are there that I think you would find very beneficial. All right, after today, we have 2 more days left in our webinar series. You can see on tomorrow, May 21st, we'll be talking about broadening participation and transferability in education outreach and extension. And then May 22nd, learning from grant proposal rejection, which we've all been there. If you haven't been there, I'm sure you'll be there. But it's important that we learn from those experiences. So we look forward to you joining us on those last 2 days this week. We're very excited about our summer grant writing accountability group. There is a QR code there that you can scan where you can register. It will be held on Wednesdays from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. We will start each session with a round robin where everyone will give us information about what they plan to accomplish during that particular session. We will also have a spreadsheet for you to track your goals, and also it helps with accountability. We will have members of our team there present so that they can, and we will be able to assist you with your writing process. So please don't forget to take advantage of that. If you have any questions, you can contact the principal investigator for this particular grant, Dr. Angela Shaw at Texas Tech University, and her email address is there on the screen. Thank you very much for your participation with today's webinar, and I will now turn it over to Dr. Shannon Coleman.
All right, so we're now opening up to questions. So if you have questions, you can put them in the chat. You also can put them in the question and answer section on the webinar. And so we'll give a few minutes to leave it open for any questions. All right, I'm not seeing any. So we do have some that we're going to ask. All right, so I wonder, and this can go to Mr. Harper or Armitra or Dr. Jackson Davis. Is it better to fully write out your proposal first and then work on your budget, or vice versa? What are your thoughts about this?
I think it's very, very important to determine the money that you have to use or to expend first, because this is going to guide everything that you do. So that would be my suggestion, to look at your money first, the money that's available, and determine how that money can be used with the proposed objectives that you already have. Because you can have your objectives without having a full written prepared proposal, right? You can have your objectives. And for example, if you have in your, I'll give an example. If you have in your objectives that you want to visit, 10 farms, but then by the time to do trainings or experiential learning, provide experiential learning opportunities. So let's say you want to visit 10 to 15 farms, but everything else in your budget that you know is needed there doesn't allow that to happen. So now you're over budget. Okay. So now instead of having to go back and tell all those farming operations that you can't visit theirs because you can only visit Bob now, then you would just rework your budget to either accommodate that, or you may have to cut in some areas. So I personally think it's best that you look at your budget and you see how much money you have and what you think you can do before you prepare a full proposal, because you could end up having to cut out significant parts of your proposal because now your budget does not handle.
Yeah. Anything you want to add to it, Mr. Harper?
Well, I see a lot of budget changes for that reason. There's a lot of people that they don't necessarily get the number right the first time. So we do see a lot of budget changes where within the budget. So because a lot of times, just like Dr. Davis said, a lot of times the agency is not going to increase the budget unless you have a real legitimate issue. And one of the issues that they do not consider to be legitimate could be miscalculating on the numbers.
Yeah.
So you would have to do a lot of I want to say within the budget changes, which will cause you to have actually reduce some of the activity that you planned on beginning, because we didn't get the number.
And here at Iowa State, we just changed systems, and your budget has to be in and submitted and to our OSPA a week before the grant is due, because they have to go through a whole process of reviewing it. And I got upset this semester because someone waited a week before things were due to say, I'm pulling out. And so our grant people had to say, okay, so we need to hurry up and fix this, because even though we're a week out, if you don't get it back in to us by this time, we're not going to guarantee that we're turning it in next week on time. So also be cognizant of those things as far as the rules that goes with, what is due first. And so on our end, a lot of times our grant people will work with us on the budget first and then say, okay, now go work on your proposal. But what we've been talking about a lot in this series is preparing ahead of time, which none of us do. I'm the one who's going to present on failure and rebuilding yourself on Wednesday, and we can talk about it. So how do you learn from those lessons when you write those proposals and stuff? So but from that, I have learned, start early. Does that mean I start before the RFA comes out? No. Am I gonna start? I'm gonna try.
Mhm.
So because I need to start knowing what I want to do and why. And like Armitra, like Dr. Jackson Davis and Mr. Harper said, knowing what you want to do ahead of time will be very critical, especially when we're doing with these budgets. Now, our grant specialist did say with a grant that was going on, we were scared of what if we put too much money here or too much money there? And she said, now there is a chance, like y'all said, if it's reasonable, that you can go back to the grant program and say, hey, we need to switch out some of the money, and this is why. But she says, so she kept telling us, don't feel like you have to be married to this. She said, but let's just give an estimation. And, having that good relationship with your grants team, with your accountant, is very critical in this process. Reminder, y'all are experts. I love to tell folks, I am a food safety expert. If I knew accounting, I would have that job too. so, I make sure I treat everybody right. So making sure that that you have those good relationships with them so you can figure out how to do some of these things.
And Dr. Coleman, I think you bring a really, really good point when you say, and we discussed this in a webinar last week, it's very important that everyone on the team, whether it be PI, co-PIs, understands each university's system. So those are things that we have to talk about ahead of time. These are the things you talk about when you're developing relationships with collaborators. Not necessarily, you don't necessarily want to wait until a grant is on the table. You want to go into a grant opportunity already knowing that University A says all the budget information has to be in a week before. Some universities say 2 weeks before because of their process. So it's very important that everyone understands what the process is like. And I think that will help to alleviate a lot of frustration.
Yeah. And just coming up, I have a colleague at Tennessee State, and he goes, his blanket number for co-PIs, everybody's gonna get 50,000. And I thought that was just him, but there's another group that I'm a part of, and me and the other co-PI, we both got 50,000. And so, coming to a lot of those different agreements. With one of my grants that I have, I let my evaluator give her numbers first. I let my co-PIs give their number, and then I worked around their number. So, and I tell them all the time, you can't complain. You had the first dibs at how much you needed. Now I'm working on the rest of it, but you put your numbers in. That's the number, And so they was like, for real, well, what if I want a student? You better put that student in there. What if I want this? You better put that in there, So just coming up with the best way of how to do that and show people that you're a good colleague to work with. I'm taking over the question and answer part. No one else has submitted any other questions, but we have 2 more. What do you think is the most common mistake that occur when completing the required forms? So a common mistake for these budget forms.
What I've seen, the most common mistake is, again, not knowing the fringe rate, not knowing the current IDC or the current fringe rate that the university has. And the way you're going to know that is to build the relationship with your OSP office. That way you know exactly what those rates are when you develop that budget. I see more times than not, I see a lot of people, they come in with the wrong it may be the current rate may be 35.42. Well, they may have just put in 35. And that usually, that 0.42 means it has a couple dollars attached to it. So that would be their main. I think I see that more often. Now I see that the most, where they use old rates, or they don't actually know what the rate is, and they just decide to put a round number in there. I think that's the biggest thing.
And I let him answer because we're the ones who be making mistakes.
I was like, I'll let Mr. Harper take that.
That's why I told y'all I sit down and say, okay, tell me what I'm supposed to do. And the good part, they also help with, say we get to the point that we're over budget, and then they help me go back and say, okay, where can you cut? And then we work through that process of them showing me where we can cut some things. So I said this last week at a conference, and I'm gonna say it again because it's gonna hunt me forever. The research VP for research was at a conference I was at. I said, sometimes I cut myself out. Close your ears, the research people that represent Iowa State. And I do that, and I'm saying this as a joke, everybody, because I'm a 12-month employee at my university. And so so I'm not necessarily going for summer salary. It will give a relief to my unit. And sometimes, we don't spend all the money. And so when they ask me on the way out, what you want to do? I say, okay, take my time out now, with the grant on the other end. And that don't always save me. So I'm currently in trouble a little bit, but I'm gonna learn how to do that a little bit more. But because there is the issue there of some grantors may not support you if you don't put your time and effort in there. And so, learning how to do that properly and don't follow in my footsteps. That's why I say I cut myself out. And you see Mr. Harper made a face. And I'm not even at his university. Who told you to cut yourself out? But that's so working with them closely will be helpful, and doing that, and dedicating that time during that work. And then our last question we have, what happens if the grant is funded and then there's not enough money to do the work?
Yeah, so it just may be a situation where the PI has to contact the granting agency to get permission to move funds around, because some moves you do have to get permission for, especially moves that relate to salary. You might have to get permission for that. I don't think, and of course there are always exceptions to the rule, but it's best to assume that you will not get more money. So when you contact the granting agency, it's best to have a plan that you've thought out of how you can move funds around to get approval for that. But that can be avoided if we just do a really good job of ensuring that we have the funds that we need when we submit the proposal. But again, things happen, right? Things happen, and you may have to call the granting agency. But that would be my suggestion.
Yeah. And also looking at, there may be different partners that you work with. So like with one of our grant, we work with the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship. And so sometimes they have some funding that you can say, okay, I can cover this with this grant, but I might need a little bit more funding for this. And if they're already your partner in that project, they can find some funding to help support you. And so that's something I've learned through this process too, of having the right partners at hand when you're doing the projects. I never feel like I can do things alone. Those letters of support should be letters of support, but also what should also be seen with that is, y'all actually working together towards things. And so sometimes they have discretionary funds that can cover different things, especially if that's some work that they really want to happen.
Very true. And I think this is where when we talked in the webinar last week of getting to know the people that you work with, getting to know what they do, what their universities allow, what they don't allow, that really helps. Those relationships that you've built with your PIs or co-PIs really does help, when these situations come, because it's not a perfect system. So we have to anticipate that things will come up, things will happen that we didn't necessarily expect. So I think when we talk about those relationships, I'm really big on collaborative work and building relationships. So I think that helps with this.
And those were my 3 questions. Last call for any questions from the attendees.
Mr. Harper, did you want to add anything?
I basically think it goes back to what we just said about the budget. If the numbers are not right, some things you have to ask the agency to move around, even within the budget, like participant costs. Participant costs is something that you really got to have permission from the agency to actually move, and that they consider that like a changing of the objective. So that you have to really, it comes right back to what we've said before. You really have to make sure everything is done right from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically it.
All right, wrap us up, Dr. Jackson Davis.
All right, well, that's all we have for you today. Thank you very much for attending. We hope that you found this information useful. So thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll see you tomorrow at our webinar. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.